Okay, good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gary Mond. I'm the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first event of 2024. We're holding speaker meetings now roughly once every 2 weeks, so there's plenty of meetings we're going to be doing during the year. Our guest speakers this evening are Dalia Ziada, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, and she's going to be in conversation with Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, who many of you are familiar with. So Dalia is an Egyptian award-winning writer and political analyst who specializes in governance, geopolitics, and defense policy in the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean. Previously, she was named by CNN as one of the 8 agents of change in the Middle East. She studied international relations at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, which is Tufts University in the United States. 2015, Dalia co-founded the Liberal Democracy Institute, which she currently chairs, besides working as the executive director of the Center for Middle East and East Mediterranean Studies. Also, she serves as a board member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Egypt's National Council for Women. She has authored a book called The Curious Case of the Three-Legged Wolf in Egypt, which is about the military element, the Islamism element, and liberal democracy in 2019, and other internationally acclaimed books on political transformation, political movements, and civil rights in the Middle East. However, most recently for Dalia, speaking out against Hamas has come with a price. She was forced to flee her home country after calling for Egypt to embrace its peace treaty with Israel and justify the war against Hamas terrorists, as well as condemning Islamist organizations. Now, Dalia is going to be in conversation with Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. Fleur needs no introduction and has been a beacon of light on our news channels throughout the past few months as she successfully gets Israel's case across to often hostile journalists. Fleur was born in London, grew up in Gibraltar, and immigrated to Israel in 2001. After becoming a city council member in the city of Jerusalem in 2016, since 2019, Fleur has served as deputy mayor of Jerusalem, in charge of foreign relations, international economic development, and tourism. In September this past year, 2023, Fleur was appointed as Israel's special envoy for innovation. Fleur is a co-founder of the United Arab Emirates Israel Business Council. She's an association which is an association of Emirati and Israeli business and government leaders fostering bilateral trade, innovation, and cooperation. She studied at King's College London, was qualified as a barrister, and practiced in London before making Aliyah. It gives me very, very great pleasure to now ask Fleur to have an in-person discussion with Dalia. This will last probably 30 to 40 minutes, and after that, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Please, please, please remember to raise your virtual hand, and I will call you in the order in which I see virtual hands go up. Don't start making gestures on the screen because I won't see them. Okay, over to you, Fleur.
Thank you so much, Gary, and thank you to Dalia Hajov, my friend, for organizing this. It's always a pleasure to be with the NJA. And tonight I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing yet again a woman who I admire greatly and who has become a friend. I'm very proud to say, very proud to call her a friend. And that is Dalia Ziada. Dalia and I met a few months ago and bonded immediately, mainly because I'm also the co-founder of the Gulf Israel Women's Forum. And so I've been, for the last 5 years, working very hard to advance women in the Middle East, leadership, and bridge building, with the vision that I think women in the Middle East could actually usher in peace in the Middle East. And we have a few common friends who are also live in that world that we've been living in the last few years of really trying to create very strong bonds between the moderate countries of the Arab world with Israel. And in October the 7th, all our peace building and bridge building work all of a sudden froze, and something very sinister took over, especially in the world of rhetoric. And a good friend of mine said to me, you have to meet Dalia because she's really paid a price to coming out against extremism. And I really didn't know much about Dalia, but the minute I met her, we connected immediately. We did an interview, which has gone viral. And I guess that's how you found us. And here we are. So, Dalia, we're speaking here to leaders of the Jewish community in the UK, wonderful people who do great work. I see amongst the audience my friend Louise Jacobs and Louise Jacobs and Naomi Lopian and other women that I know that I've worked with and who do amazing work. So we're in good company here in women who are bridge builders and change makers. And Dalia, I just want to start simply by you heard the introduction that Gary gave you, so we know who you are and where you come from and what you did. But tell us a little bit about where you were on October 7th and the days that led up to essentially you having to leave Egypt.
Thank you so much, Fleur, for the nice introduction. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone at the NGA. I'm really honored to be with all of you here. Yes, actually, our interview, Fleur, went viral because of your wonderful energy and your wonderful questions. So thank you for that. Speaking about October 7, yes, this is the day that changed the lives of many people, including myself, although I'm not directly involved in the war. But as we say, it's a regional war. Everyone in the region was going to be affected in one way or another. And I think I was one of those who were affected in some way by the terrorism of Hamas. What happened on October 7, I was just returning back from the United States after I was speaking at a think tank in Washington about Eastern Mediterranean affairs and how, peace is happening finally in our region and everything is getting on the right track. And like there was a lot of optimism in the room, actually. And I returned back to Cairo on that day to this horrible news of targeting civilians, Israeli civilians by Hamas militants. At the beginning, I thought, because, I depended on the Arab media. So I thought, based on what is being said in our Arab and Egyptian media, is that it's just another clash between Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants around Gaza. That's what was only said in the news. No one mentioned the killing of the civilians, the targeting of the women, the targeting of the toddlers and the children. No one mentioned any of that in our media stations. So the day went by, and then I started to see the truth. I started to see the real videos, the real news. And I later on, like a few days after that, I was invited to a video conference organized by the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel, where they showed us the real videos collected from the houses, from the mobile phones of the terrorists, of what happened on that day. And at that moment, I felt really, really offended by what I saw, and I felt like deep anger towards our media stations that are spreading these lies. And deep in my heart, I felt like I'm responsible somehow to stand up for the Jewish people, to tell the truth on their behalf. So I went directly to my social media platforms, which I have a very good following there in terms of number and also the quality of people. Like there are presidents of the states who are following me. So I thought, okay, I have to go there and just say the truth. So I went there and I told the truth. I told what I saw, and I said our media is lying, and here is what happened. And I condemned Hamas, and I said I support Israel 100% in its war on Hamas. And I even called on Arab countries, if they think with a little logic, that they should back Israel in this war against Hamas. Soon after, I started to receive a horrible backlash, starting from social media attacks coming from people in Egypt and even from Gaza and other Arab countries, describing me being a Zionist, being not a good Muslim. And some of them started to send me death threats. Some radicals in Egypt went to my mother's house looking for me, and they wanted to punish me, I mean physically, to practice violence on me. for what I did, for not being a good Muslim, for criticizing Hamas and for supporting Israel. And unfortunately, when I contacted the Egyptian authorities, the law enforcement forces, the police forces to protect me, they refused. And they said, we cannot protect you because you said you support Israel. You are a Zionist for us now. And the next day, and I thought it will stop here, but actually the next day, the next morning, a few hours after this phone call that left me devastated, I found out that some lawyer in Egypt close to the Egyptian state filed legal claims against me, accusing me of espionage to the Israeli Mossad and spreading false information with the purpose to disturb public security.
This is
And
the state prosecutor, right?
it is, yes, it is the state prosecutor. That's right. And accusing me of threatening Egypt's national security just because I said the truth. And the irony here is that someone like me, who is actually fighting against terrorism, is a threat to national security in Egypt, while all the radicals who are cheering for Hamas in the Egyptian street are not seen as a death threat. So this is the tragedy we are living in now. So I had to leave Egypt immediately, unfortunately, with a broken heart, and I had to seek refuge somewhere else.
Dalia, why was this particularly surprising to you? Because you, when you spoke out, you didn't feel you were going against your government. I mean, Egypt and Israel, apart from the fact we have peace, let's call it a cold peace. But we share enemies. And part of those enemies are the Muslim Brotherhood, which is Hamas. So for you, you didn't think you were doing anything controversial. How did that feel?
Absolutely, Fleur. Like, not for a second. I thought like I'm already following what I'm, because for many years before that, I have been already in support of the Egyptian state in their fight against terrorism, against the Muslim Brotherhood, against the radicals in named Salafists in Egypt. And I have always been working on peace initiatives in the region, either between Israel and Arab countries or between Egypt and Turkey and so on. So I thought I am not already getting out of the line. And also there is a fact that there is a peace treaty that has been holding for more than 40 years between Egypt and Israel. And there is a history of amazing cooperations that happened in the past 7 years on economic and military levels between Egypt and Israel. So Israel has always been a good neighbor to us, and Hamas has already threatened us threatened Egypt, I mean, in Sinai, killing our soldiers. And with the help of Israel, we were able to get rid of them in 2015. So I thought it makes perfect sense that Egypt should be helping Israel in this war now, the same way Israel helped Egypt in its war against similar terrorists. But I was very surprised, and I think somehow what happened on October 7 scratched the surface and made like the real faces of everyone show up, including the real face of the deep state in Egypt, which still up till today carries a lot of hate, a lot of negative sentiments, I would say, towards Israel, despite all the good relationship and all the goodwill that Israel has been trying to prove to Egypt all this time.
So the irony here is, Dalia, what you're telling us is that Israel helped Egypt in the Sinai get rid of Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood extremists, Salafists, or they were different type. They were kind of the same branch as Hamas, right?
Yeah. Yes, actually,
and
against
Egypt wanted to get rid of them and got rid of them with the help of Israel. And so when you spoke out, you didn't think you were doing anything crazy.
That's true. That's true. And by the way, Israel helped us fight against Hamas militants in Sinai, because what happened after the Arab Spring is that Hamas abused the weakness, the state of weakness that Egypt has gone through at that time, and infiltrated into Sinai.
Yes,
and they started to build terrorist cells there, and these terrorist cells started to attack our soldiers. And for years, between I think 2012 up till 2015, they were killing Egyptian soldiers, bombing them, killing them while asleep in their parades or so. So it was horrific. And only thanks to the help of Israel, which, by the way, is not my words. I'm not claiming that Israel helped us. The Egyptian president earlier in 2023 came out in public and said that he contacted Israel in 2014 and 2015 and asked them to allow the Egyptian troops to come closer to the Israeli border, and they agreed, and they even provided military aid to Egypt by plane like jet fighters and other military assistance to help Egypt fight against these terrorists. So it's the irony here is that Hamas is seen as a threat, is seen as a terrorist organization only when it attacks Arab countries, but it's not, it's seen as heroes and resistance movement when it attacks Israel. This is something that I don't know, I find this shocking and saddening.
It's very sad. And I've always said that even though we've had peace with Egypt and the same with Jordan, unfortunately, the government did nothing to get rid of the hateful rhetoric against Israel. So it was like on the outside, we're friendly with Israel because we need them. It's stability for us, and we get rid of the extremists with Israel's help. But on the inside, let's keep attacking Jews because it plays well on the Arab street to blame Israel for the bad economy or whatever else is going on. And in the end, that ends up becoming a threat to the own government, because Egypt is not going to break the peace treaty with Israel, because if it did, they'd have 2 million Gazans flooding through its borders. So it needs, and they wouldn't have the aid that America gives Egypt, because the aid that America gives Egypt is conditional. It's a triangle, is conditional on the peace. And so I think the problem here of the rhetoric, which I've been talking about for a long time, becomes a real threat. It's not just, let's just talk against Israel in Arabic, but in English, that's really the root of the problem. And you basically became the scapegoat for those years of hatred and rhetoric. How does that make you feel?
Yes, that's a very good point, Fleur, and thank you for raising this, because what people in the world, might see confusing here is how come the Egyptian president El-Sisi, who was very friendly to Israel, all of a sudden is turning against Israel and actually using this rhetoric about the war to fuel more anger against Israel and against the Jewish people to benefit himself. So the issue is that simply people like President El-Sisi and other presidents in other countries, or other leaders, in other Arab countries, including in the Gulf, including even in Jordan and like immediate neighbors of Israel, they for so long have been using the Israel-Palestinian conflict to distract their people from their internal problems. And right now, these leaders are facing the threat or the outrage of the people in their countries for reasons that has nothing to do with Israel or the war. Mainly it's because of bad domestic politics, political oppression, bad economy, and so on. In Egypt, there is a severe economic crisis that's making
I hear Egypt could be on the verge of economically collapsing at the moment.
Exactly. So the best strategy, I think, for the leadership in the state leadership, they thought, okay, and I think this is how perhaps the intelligence in Egypt was thinking, okay, let's make a big cloud that's called Israel is the enemy again, so it makes people unable to see the real problem in Egypt. And this is what they did. And I think they have used me and what I did, because I was one of only 3 people in Egypt who dared to speak against Hamas. And I'm the only one person in Egypt who dared to say, I support Israel in its war against Hamas. So the other 2 people were also harassed. Like one of them had to leave the country to Canada. He's a political activist, and his family were harassed, and he was harassed, and he had to to divorce his wife and leave the country to Canada. And here I am, like I had also to leave the country after all the harassment I've been receiving from the state and from the extremists. So they made this big cloud using us as scapegoats to beautify, to whitewash their hands from their cooperation with Israel. So I think like somehow Sisi was thinking, okay, I don't want to be the bad dictator who is also cooperating with Israel, because this will double the outrage against him. So it's enough to be a bad dictator. So he whitewashed his hand from being cooperative with Israel by all these attacks that me and the other two people have received, from either from the state or from the extremists. But let me quickly refer to something here. Egypt always likes to speak nicely about the Palestinians. I mean, to show support to the Palestinians all the time. But when it comes to action, they do nothing. Really. They
Well, they have a
Egypt
border
likes
with Gaza. You have Europe taking in millions of Syrians, millions of Ukrainians. You got, they say Gaza is an open air prison. Well, a prison doesn't have three walls. And they do nothing to help their Palestinian brethren, let's call them that, because they know that they're going to get Hamas terrorists sneaking in as well. So they don't want them. The Jordanians have said very clearly they don't want them. Nobody wants the Palestinians, but we have to deal with them, and we're the ones being attacked.
Unfortunately, true. That's true. And the irony here is that Egypt and Jordan and the others, all the times they say, okay, that's as you said, Fleur, like the Palestinians are our brothers and sisters, either in Arabism or in Islam or so. So we will always support them. But okay, when it came the time for Egypt to open the border for the Palestinian people, Egypt refused. And actually, one of the claims that was being said, which is partially true, yes, there is a fear that Hamas militants could be leaking into Sinai and launching war against Israel. And then this war leads to tensions again with Israel and Egypt. And you know this rhetoric. But I think this was only said to sell this idea of fear to the general public in Egypt. So they will refuse to accept the Palestinians. But the truth is not like that, because we have examples before, like, for example, when the war happened in 2014, an episode of war also between Hamas and Israel at that time, Egypt opened the borders for the Palestinian people, and they got into Sinai, received medical treatment, and lived there for a while. And then when things went down, they went back to Gaza.
Well, this
So
is the
why
argument I've been making. You don't have to say they're going to resettle forever in
Yes.
Egypt. You can just take them in there. They're saying now there's 2 million people stuck in the south and it's all very, very crowded. We'll open the border. You have a huge desert, which is mainly empty. Get all the international organizations to help over there. Why? We have to clean out the terrorists. We have no choice anymore. And
Yes,
so
actually,
I don't understand. But so what do you feel? Let me ask you another question. What do you feel about the fact that Egypt is trying to broker the next sort of ceasefire / release of hostages? Do you think they're acting in good faith?
I think Egypt is coming too late to do something.
Too little, too late.
Exactly. Too little, too late. That's true. Egypt had this golden opportunity at the beginning of the war to step up and act as a mediator and deal with its friend Israel and deal with Hamas, which it has a leverage on, and actually bring both sides to the table and control the things. But Egypt did not do any of that. The Egyptian state chose.
Did they not try? Did they not try at the beginning, Dalia? Because they've always gotten involved in the Gaza wars.
They didn't try, no, not even for a second. Actually, they immediately decided to bend to the radical rhetoric in the Egyptian street against Israel, and they immediately took the side of Hamas, immediately, without even thinking, which eventually hurt Egypt and hurt Egypt's credibility, and is making Egypt unable now to mediate to seriously mediate for a ceasefire. First of all, it's too late. Second, Egypt has lost its credibility as a mediator, and I think it has lost its credibility as a mediator not only for the Israelis but even for Hamas. See, for example, how Hamas responded immediately to the Qatari initiative.
Yeah.
The initiative by Qatar immediately responded and immediately started to take action on it. But when Egypt made this offer, this proposal, actually they ignored it, and Hamas even like said, we will never listen to Egypt, we don't agree with what Egypt is saying. So
Dalia,
Egypt is losing.
Sisi was always seen as a very pragmatic leader that knew how to do business with Bibi. They would always joke, Bibi and Sisi, right? What happened to him? What changed with him? What do you think? Is he under political pressure at home? Is this his personal scapegoat for the economy collapsing, for any type of, I don't know if there's corruption in Egypt? How do you interpret Sisi's kind of U-turn on having very good, stable, friendly relations with Israel?
To be honest, I think he personally is pro-peace with Israel.
Right.
He's personally, like on a personal level, he is supportive of better relationships with Israel. And I know, yes, he's very pragmatic. It's like how he's thinking. He's always behind where is the benefit, and he goes to it. And of course, he knows very well that his benefit and Egypt's benefit is 100% with Israel. We are interdependent economically and security-wise in many ways, actually. We are immediate neighbors, And so I think he somehow was under pressure. First of all, the pressure of the public, the public outrage from the bad economy, the bad politics, and so on. So he didn't want to double this outrage by insisting or keeping his position as a supporter of Israel. And also, he's probably under the very heavy pressure of the deep Egyptian state. And by the deep Egyptian state, I'm speaking about the military institution and the intelligence, the General Intelligence Service, which are the de facto rulers of Egypt right now. So, of course, he is under this pressure, and he does not want to take the risk.
Why are they so anti? They obviously understand that they need the aid of America in their military. They have military cooperation with Israel. Why is the deep state so anti-Israel, do you think?
Oh, they have always been like this. It has to do with their ideology. Like part of the military ideology in Egypt, for example, dictates that Israel is our historical enemy, and it will always be our historical enemy, regardless of what happens of good relationships or
because
so.
there's blood that's been spilled. It's very interesting because the first time I went to Dubai, I met an Egyptian journalist who interviewed me. And he told me that his grandfather had died in the 1967 war and how they're so, bitter about it. And I actually never thought about the 1967 war from the side of the people who attacked us, of course. I never thought about it from the Egyptian, and he was still very bitter about that. And so is it because we've actually fought wars and there's been loss of life and there's been bloodshed between Egyptians and Israelis, and the military have, brought that into their ideology? They've never let go of those wars.
Oh, of course, part of it has to do with the wars, but the irony here is how we handled the anniversaries of the wars after that in comparison to how Egypt handled the anniversary of the peace treaty after that. Yes, we had wars that lasted, let's say, for 10 years or so between Egypt and Israel, but we have right now a 40 years old peace treaty. Despite that, every year Egypt celebrates the anniversary of the 1973 war with Israel and never celebrates the anniversary of the peace treaty with Israel.
That's a very interesting point.
Yes. Why is that? Because the problem in Egypt, unlike the rest of the Arab countries, is somehow compound. You can see it very clearly in Egypt and Syria in particular. The perception or the Arab-Israeli conflict has different layers. The first layer of it has to do with the Muslim versus Jewish thing, or Muslims and Jews should be fighting.
The tribal layer, yeah.
That's right, exactly. So this is one layer of it. We must, the religious layer, I would say.
Yeah.
The other layer,
Politicization of religion,
the politicization, exactly. So we can see this in all the Arab countries and all the Muslim countries, even in countries like Pakistan or
Yeah.
Southeast Asia countries that has nothing to do with the Arab region actually, and has never been involved in wars with Israel, but they are against Israel automatically just because Israel is the state of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
So this is one layer of the thing. Another layer that you can very clearly see in Egypt and Syria in particular is the Arabism ideology that was
The
implanted,
pan-Arabism,
the
like national
pan-Arabism.
Arab identity.
Exactly, that was implanted by Gamal Abdel Nasser in the
Yeah, that was
1950s.
Nasser's. Yeah, he was the leader of that.
Yes, and actually he used this even to persecute the Jewish people in Arab countries
Yeah.
and force them to leave these Arab countries. And this is when we started to see a shift on how the Jewish people in Arab countries were treated. It's because
Yeah,
of this.
and had to run away. A million became refugees.
Exactly. So in Egypt, we have these two layers and they are very intense. We have the religious layer and the Arabism, pan-Arabism layer. So it's very complicated in Egypt. And I think this is the reason why up till today, only few people in the country are starting to see the truth about Israel and starting to really to remove this fog
The
and see
blinkers. Yeah.
clearly. Yes, to
You think
remove this.
so, Dalia? You think so, or do you feel very alone in this fight? Because you're so brave. What
Thank
you've been
you.
through. I mean, a lot of people. I can speak out all I want, but I'm safe, relatively safe in
Yeah.
my country. You
Yeah.
had to run away from your country, from your family. How does that
Yes.
make you feel? I mean, you're one of the bravest people I know, but how do you feel?
Oh, thank you, Fleur. Actually, it feels bad that I had to leave my country, my family, and literally everything behind. It was not easy, and it's not easy, and I think it will never be easy on me. But this is what happened, I mean. But to be like what may somehow brings some hope to my heart is that I'm not alone. There are many others in Egypt and the Arab countries, especially from the younger, or let's say the middle generation, not the very younger ones who are affected by TikTok and so, but from my generation at
Yeah.
least, who experienced the Arab Spring, who saw the cooperation between Egypt and Israel, who got in contact with Israelis and Jewish people all over the world, who very much believe in peace. Right now, the number of us who are speaking out about this is very little. But underneath, there are many others who still believe in this and believe in peace and wants better relationships with Israel. At the same time I was receiving death threats, I was also receiving great messages from Egyptians and Arabs who saying that I'm doing the right thing and they wish to do the same things that I'm doing, but they are too
They're
scared.
scared. They weren't brave enough, but they support you. I think
But
that's
they
always the
support
way.
me.
You always have people. I mean, we both, when we did that interview, got a lot of hate on Twitter, on the social media, but there was so much encouragement, support, and love that I saw
That's
that you got.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And this is I think what gives us like a glimpse of hope, that at the end of the tunnel there is light.
That's what I'm most impressed about you, Dalia, that when we met and we sat down for coffee, you still left me feeling positive at the end. What is your positive vision for our region?
I very much believe in peace, and I believe that us, the peacemakers, are the good people here in this equation, and we will win in the end because peace will always win.
Inshallah, Dalia. I think we
Yeah.
should open up I think we should open up to questions because I can see
Yes,
people are so
that's great.
interested.
So, if people could, I'm starting to see hands go up. That's great. I'm going to ask the first question myself. Between 1948 and 1967, Gaza was under the control of Egypt. And when people say, why doesn't Egypt take Gaza back? The usual answer is, oh, they would refuse to do so. There's no way they would take Gaza back. My view is that if Egypt was offered enough money to take Gaza back, possibly from an American administration, then perhaps something might happen there. I'm wondering, Dalia, do you think there is any possibility, assuming they were paid enough money, might be $1 trillion, who knows how much it would be, but it would be a very large sum. But assuming they were paid enough money, might they do it?
Actually, I don't think this is going to happen because of first, like there is this concept in the Egyptian state in general, not only the current Egyptian state, but in general, I mean the deep state in Egypt, is that if the Gazans were taken out of this piece of land or taken out of this context of always being in opposition to Israel or fighting with Israel, this will end up the Palestinian cause, which is something very important for all the Arabs, as you know. So this is one thing. The other thing, Egypt knows very well that if it takes this risk, it will come with a lot of trouble, because it will come with all the troubles, like all the troubles that Israel is now dealing with will be exported to Egypt, and Egypt will have to deal with. And then Egypt will be responsible for defending Gaza if it becomes part of Egypt. So does it mean eventually Egypt will end up fighting with Israel on behalf of Gaza, for example? So it's a very complicated issue. I don't think in any time soon the Egyptian military would agree, or the Egyptian state, I mean, in general, would agree to make it happen.
I agree with Dalia, and even between 48 and 67, you know, even though it was under Egyptian control, they didn't really want to deal with it very much. They kind of left it as a poor stepbrother type of thing, and not really get their hands involved in Gaza. Gary, will you moderate the questions, or do you want me?
Yes, I will.
Go ahead.
So the first question, first hand I saw got was Deborah Wald. Deborah, if you could unmute yourself and preferably turn on your camera so we can see you.
Hi there.
And then after Deborah, it'll be Isla Kirk, and after Isla, it'll be Sandra Dangor. Deborah.
Dalia and Fleur, just an astonishingly kind of, it's just so wonderful to hear a kind of a truth conversation happening. One of the things that you talked about, Dalia, was the rhetoric, and Fleur as well, the rhetoric, that there is one rhetoric for the English-speaking world and another rhetoric for the Arab-speaking world. Where do you think, Dalia, might the rhetoric, if the rhetoric could change, where do you think it could change from, and how difficult will it be to turn this ship around?
That's a tough question, but actually, to give credit to Fleur, this was her point about the difference between English and Arabic rhetoric. It's a very good observation of hers. So actually, yes, that's true. It's very difficult to expect any change in this anytime soon, because again, of the complexity of the issue. It's not only a political issue, it's also a religious issue. So I think if we need to start to change this rhetoric, we have to start in the mosques in the Arab world. You know, every Friday up till today, we have like Friday sermons every Friday at noon. In every Friday ceremony, there is a stable prayer against the Jewish people and all who support them. Like there is a stable prayer up till today. It's like recited every week. So I think we need to start with the mosques. We need to educate people that it's not a religious conflict. We have no conflict with the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are just part of our big human family. There is no conflict between Muslims and Jews, and there should not be a conflict. And then this will like put an end to the rhetoric that is being used by the extremists and terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood to mobilize people against the Israelis. And then after that, I think on the more like a state-to-state level, things could be restored again between Egypt and Israel and the other Arab countries, while the people will start to accept this as a fact, like two neighbor states are working together.
I want to make an observation from my experience in Dubai, in the UAE. And what's interesting about the UAE and now Saudi, which eventually we will have peace with, this has frozen it a little bit, but it will happen, is the way that the Emiratis managed to get rid of their extremist ideology and extremists amongst them, which they did 10, 15 years ago. They got rid of the Muslim Brotherhood. But it was very interesting to me that the first time I went to Dubai, I met a really nice guy who became a friend of mine, Ahmed Zakaria. And he was telling me that every Friday, and I thought this was crazy, but now I understand why, that every Friday, the speeches of the imams in the mosques had to be pre-approved by the government, or the government send out kind of message points for the Divar Torah, let's call it, that's the Hebrew version of the imam's speech, for the Divar Torah every Friday. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's crazy. They're basically being given the talking points every Friday. But Dalia is talking about the other extreme, when if you don't control what's going on in the mosques, it's all out Jew hatred. And so I think it's interesting to see where the countries have managed to get rid of the hateful rhetoric. And the result of that is that 10 years later, we have peace with them, because the brainwashing is slowly coming out of the rhetoric and people's minds. And so I think it's interesting to see how these other countries are doing it. And Saudi is also doing it, getting rid of the Wahhabi ideology, getting rid of the anti-Semitism in the school books, small but very significant steps towards coming into a new era of peace and understanding in the region.
Yeah, we have now another 5 people have raised their hands. Next one to speak is Ayla Kirk. Ayla, could you unmute, and if we could see you, that would be great.
Hi, good evening. I'm unmuted, but I'm not doing the video because I just got back from yoga class and I don't want to shock anybody.
All right.
First, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It really is such a privilege because, you know, as the lay people, we just get to see you talk and read about you and everything else. So it's really, really such a privilege. So I'm very, very curious to know what your opinion is of Mossab Hassan Youssef, who's basically been all over the media talking about Hamas. He wrote a book called Son of Hamas, and he also created a movie about that. And so I'm curious to know how you feel about what he's doing. In many ways, it's sort of similar, you know, in terms of his message and what he's doing. And so I'd just like to know what your opinion is.
Will you start, Fleur? Is it for me, right?
Yes.
It's for you, Dalia. It's all yours.
It's for both of you. But
yes, I think what he's doing is very brave. Actually, he knows that he's paying a very, very high price. He's putting his life at risk, and this is very brave of him, actually. And I think what he's doing is going to have a great influence because it's exposing the ugly face of Hamas to the young people and the children who Hamas is constantly trying to recruit under, again, the claim of liberating Al-Aqsa or liberating Jerusalem, you know, all these claims. So I think, yes, he's offering the truth. He's offering his own personal experience. It's very brave and very good. And I think he needs all types of protection possible for him to keep like delivering his message.
I agree with Dalia, and I think he does live under some type of, you know, secretive locations and things like that. He's very brave, and is doing a great job.
Okay, our next questioner is one of our advisory board members, Sandra Dangor. And
hi, Sandra.
Hi,
Hi. After Sandra, I'll ask Noreen Firestone, then Naomi Lopian, then Lindsay Cass, and then Simon Redding. Sandra, over to you.
Dalia, thank you so much for such an enlightening talk, really. And Fleur, thank you for asking the probing questions as well. Dalia, my family comes from Iraq for hundreds and hundreds of years. And for most of the time, Arabs and Jews lived happily, sort of, side by side, till 1948-ish. So when you spoke about the Jews leaving the Arab countries, and you spoke about how there are your generation and older who are speaking, albeit quietly, about making peace with Israel and helping with Israelis. But it's the younger generation that worries me. I met a couple of years ago a Kuwaiti couple who were in their 30s. They had no idea that Jews had lived in Iraq. They had no idea that Jews had lived in other Middle Eastern countries. How can we change that history that they are not aware of? Because I think that might be some way to bridge the peace if they knew that there was a Jewish history there, which they are not being taught.
They just have to eat in your house one week, Sandra, and they'd know.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandra. This is very moving to know that you're from Iraq originally. So it's so nice actually, because some people claim that especially here in the Western country I am in right now, which is so ironic, is that one of like the slogans the people of the Free Palestine protesters say all the time is that the Israelis are white colonialist occupiers coming from some, another planet or something to occupy Palestine, the Palestinian land or so. Actually, the funny thing about that is that at least 60% or so of the Israeli people today are from Arab origins. They came from Arab countries. They were pushed by these Arab countries to go to Israel in the 1950s and the 1960s when they were persecuted in these countries. So it's so ironic to see that now these people who are already having Arab origins are being labeled as white colonialists coming from somewhere else. So I think there should be a lot of education to the younger generations about this, because I'm sure it will bridge a lot of gaps. For me, like everyone else, I was raised in a very anti-Semitic society. Egypt is, again, like very much into pan-Arabism ideology, and I was raised in all of that. But what changed me is that I met Jewish Egyptians. I met in a relatively young age. I was like in my teen time or so. And I had the opportunity to know very closely a Jewish family that had to remain in Egypt, and they had like to change their identity to a Muslim identity just in order not to leave Egypt. And this was at the time, like in the 1960s, and this time when like the grandmother of this family, she the Jewish people were forced to leave Egypt, and they have a stamp on their passport saying that they will not be allowed to go back to Egypt again. So every time this woman, her name is Laila, every time she went to the notary public just to have this stamp on her passport, she collapses and cries and refuses to do that. This happened 4 times. In the 5th time, her husband told her, okay, we're going to stay, but we're going to change our identity. This story moved me, and actually, like within the family, they know they are Jewish, but they cannot until today like say it publicly. Every time I hear that, I feel like someone should like stand up for these people. Someone should, like, I feel I don't know, I don't even know how to describe what I felt towards them and what I still feel about them, but this was the point when I decided to work on Muslim-Jewish dialogue, to change the perception of the Jewish people in my community, either Muslim community or Arab community. This is what changed me forever, and this is what's motivating me to do what I'm doing today. So I think many people would also change if they learn about the truth, including the young people who are also affected by all the negative rhetoric on social media about the Jewish people and about Israel. If they know the truth, I think they will develop a lot of sympathy towards Israel and towards the Jewish people.
Great.
Just want
Thank
to add
you.
one thing, that Israel doesn't do much about educating people about Jews from Arab lands. For the last 5 years, I've been trying to convince the government to give me a plot of land to open a museum of life for Jews in Arab and Muslim lands, because I wanted to include Iran in this museum. Because every time there's a foreign, head of state that arrives to Israel, where do they take them? They take them to Yad Vashem, and then they take them to Herzl's grave. Now, what is the message there? We're here because of the Holocaust. That's the message. Now, of course, that was the accelerator, but it completely dismisses the whole narrative of Jews of the region. And as a proud Sephardi Jew, I'm finding it difficult within Israel to change the narrative, never mind outside of Israel. So that's one of the things that I work on, to try and change that story, because there were refugees, for Palestinian refugees after 48, but there were slightly more Arab, Jewish people from Arab lands that were refugees. And today there are zero Sephardi refugees, and there's somehow 5 million Palestinian refugees that started from 800,000. And so, whatever, there's a lot to talk about that, but Israel does not help itself in that, Sandra. And it's something that I'm constantly having to fight and remind people about.
Thank you, Fleur. Our next speaker is Noreen Firestone. Noreen.
Hi, good evening, Fleur and Dalia. I'm from Carmiel in the north. Just come back from a rally for the abducted and missing. But I have a completely different question. You talked about I can't remember what you called it, the women's committee that you're involved.
Gulf Israel Women's Forum, yes.
I just have a question. Are either of you involved with Women Wage Peace, Nashim Osot Shalom?
So, Women Wage Peace is an Israeli organization for Jewish and Arab women in Israel.
Although there are many groups in overseas.
Oh, I didn't know that. They're a wonderful group. That poor woman who was one of the founders was brutally murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. I've been to one or two of their kind of dialogue tents, but I haven't gotten too involved in it in Israel, and I've been more involved in the whole Gulf Israel women's relationships. No. And I don't think they have a branch in Egypt, so I don't.
Oh, there's a group of women in Gaza.
They had a branch in Gaza?
Nashim Hashemesh, the women of the sun.
Oh, wow.
God, there has been contact with them even through this terrible time that we are having now.
Well, that's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it was just a side question. And I really, really enjoyed your dialogue this evening. Your conversations have been fascinating. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Dalia, do you want to add anything before I ask the next speaker?
No, I just want to say thank you.
Lovely. Naomi Lopian, you're next. If possible, if you could come off mute and also turn your camera on. Naomi Lopian.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, pleased to see you.
Hi, Fleur. Good evening. Lovely to see you again, and how wonderful to see you together with Dalia. Dalia and Fleur together, you both give me a lot of hope and real hope, because from the two backgrounds that you come from, of course, I share the same background. I'm Jewish with Fleur, and to see you from the Muslim background and Egyptian background, actually understanding Israel's point of view and actually finally saying, I think it's the first time or one of the first times that I've heard that what Israel is saying is the truth. You mentioned education, and I try and do a lot of education. And Fleur, I agree with you about doing a museum about the Arab world. I think it's important, so don't give up the fight. It's very important to show that Israel existed also well before in our story, the Holocaust. And you're right, it was an accelerator, but there's a lot of history before that. But Dalia, you also mentioned like your generation maybe can understand the truth about Israel and Egypt, but the younger TikTok generation are still fed on the hate and the two levels of hate that you described. How can one move, I ask both ladies, forward? How can one actually change that rhetoric? I mean, they've seen clips like you and I have seen about Kibbutz Be'eri, about Kfar Aza, about the things that happened. I don't even want to go into detail, to women, etc., etc. And yet they believe the Hamas health ministry and the IDF has to be verified, and that's also being fed on the BBC News all the time. How do we move forward, girls? Here we see peace and agreement and, talking side by side. How practically can we do more, both to Dalia and Fleur?
Thank you, Naomi. Actually, I've been warning against what's happening on TikTok since a very long time ago. But there was no much action taken to counter this hate narrative, because my first time to realize what was happening on TikTok is really dangerous is when I found my nephew, who's only 9 years old, one day playing a game on TikTok that is mainly about burning the Israeli flag. And when I asked him why you're playing this game, he said, because this is a bad country. I told him, do you know what is this country is? He said, it's called Israel. I told him, do you know where it is? What is it doing? What is it about? He didn't know. But he's doing what his peers or friends on social media are doing, just following the rhetoric, following the hate against Israel. Of course, this intensified very much after the October 7 massacre and the eruption of the war, with all the lies being mentioned in the media, and Hamas, as you mentioned, like spreading all these lies about women and children being killed. Of course, yes, we know there is, of course, a number of civilians that are being hurt in this, but I am sure these numbers are so much exaggerated, and I have zero trust in the statistics provided to us by Hamas, because
Gaza Health Ministry is Hamas.
Correct.
exactly. And
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
in their best interest to spread these lies to gain legitimacy for continuing this war against Israel or calling for a ceasefire to protect themselves or so. But if we think about it honestly, if Hamas are really as brave as they are claiming they are, and heroes and so on, why they are hiding in the tunnels and leaving the civilians up there above the ground to face all the hell of the war alone without them? Although actually it should be the other way around. They should at least put the civilians in the tunnels and they go up there fight, but this is not the case. They want the civilians to be killed. And we saw Haniyeh, one of the leaders of Hamas, coming out on Al Jazeera TV saying very clearly that we want more bloodshed in Gaza. He's proudly saying it because this is the fuel for our revolution against Israel's tyranny. So he's saying that. So it's the culture of death in Gaza, unfortunately. But speaking about the younger generations, there is also hope in Gaza, by the way. The younger generations among the Palestinians are very different. And I think it is mainly because of the peace initiatives that has been led by Israeli and Palestinian women, by the way. Speaking about women, so in the past few years, bringing like school children from Israel and Palestine together, making them do activities together, this created a generation in Gaza that is loving life, that is challenging this culture of death that Hamas wants to use against, that Hamas has always been speaking about in Gaza. So I think this new generation in Gaza, in comparison to the younger generation in other Arab countries, brings us a lot of hope also. But again, like, I have to emphasize the importance of education, the importance of media outreach, and I think Israel needs to do like more work regarding media outreach, honestly. But I think Fleur is the best one to comment on this.
Well, I've always been very critical that we don't have a unified structure for public diplomacy. Everybody does their own thing. We're fighting a war on the war of words, I call it, without a central command. Everybody's shooting in a different direction, but that's a whole other subject for a whole other Zoom. What I will say is that I'm very worried about TikTok, and I'll tell you why. In China, I mean, TikTok we all know is a Chinese invention, and in China they limit TikTok for their younger people to 2 hours a day, and all of the content in Chinese TikTok is about science and nature. And yet for the rest of the world, it's a sewer. It's a sewer. And I actually, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm really not, but there's something very sinister going on with basically the chaos on TikTok specifically, with the rest of the world, and China keeping their content very curated for an enlightened generation. And I'm worried about that. And I think that at some point, you know, I believe in freedom of speech, but at some point this indoctrination may need to be legislated on.
That's probably all over the world as well. Thank you. We've got time for three more questions. Lindsay Cass, then Simon Redding, and finally Flora Frank. And if there's time, I'll ask Stephanie Cronson as well. But Lindsay, would you like to go first?
Hi there. Thank you very much. First of all, I just wanted to thank Dalia for such an interesting talk. It really was very interesting. It was great to hear a different side of it. You're right about the media. It's a shame we can't get you onto the BBC or Sky to give some of your opinions.
I'm trying to get her on.
I bet you are. It would be great to hear her. But my question actually is, with all the terrorism that's going on and what the aim is of the terrorists, do you think there could ever be a two-state solution? And if there is, do you think it would work?
The two-state solution. Oh, it's a big dream that I think is somehow unattainable, because it's very complicated, not only because of the current war, but also because of the logistics of it, the specific details of it. First of all, where would be the land for the Palestinians that they will call their own state? Whether is it safe or not to allow the Palestinians to have their own army? And to which extent will the Arab countries will be willing to intervene to make this new Palestinian state succeed without hurting the security of the Israeli state, the current Israeli state? And also in terms of economy, how is it going to be run? Who's going to pay funds, and who's going to manage these funds inside the new Palestinian state? So all of these questions has to be answered first. But above all of that, we are still dealing with a very severe problem that's going on now, which is the corruption of the Palestinian powerful people, or the people in power. Yeah. In the Palestinian territories, including Hamas on one side and even the Palestinian Authority, and even those who call themselves the third dimension of this equation, like the third solution, who are not Hamas or Fatah, but they are leading other political groups. They are still also corrupt. So that's why that's one reason of their continued fights together. By the way, they keep fighting together. There is a lot of division even among the Palestinians simply because of this corruption. They couldn't even hold elections a couple of years ago because of this corruption. So I think this is the biggest and main problem that needs to be resolved after finishing Hamas, or at least weakening Hamas.
Totally agree with Dalia. I'll just add one more thing. And I think that ideologically, or at least maybe they're just lying to their people. The Palestinian leadership has always been more interested in destroying the state of Israel than building their own state. And they've proven this again and again and again. They have to at some point decide that they're choosing to put their people in front of either an ideology that they haven't yet ideologically accepted that Israel is here to stay. They keep telling their people that one day they're going to kick us out. So they've not prepared their people for any type of peaceful resolution. That's the first thing. And secondly, what Dalia mentioned, they actually profit from the conflict. Mahmoud Abbas and his sons and all his posse have private jets and castles, and they profiteer from this conflict. And unless the whole world stops funding them until they actually have some decent accountability for what they're doing with their money. I mean, Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh lives in Qatar. He's worth £5 billion. What is this? So, you know, there's a lot to clean out before we even start to think about a two-state solution. We would all want to believe in it, but at the moment, I don't see that it's a realistic prospect.
Thank you, Fleur. Simon Redding. You're on mute, Simon. Okay.
Right, I'm off mute now. Yes, thank you, Gary, very much for moderating an excellent talk. But and Dalia and Fleur, I must say, if only we could get you onto the main media in this country, it would make an enormous difference. Because unfortunately, and I'm sure Gary would agree with me, we are losing the propaganda war at the moment in this country, big time. I'm afraid we're not getting the right people in front, and there's too much take it or leave it, and we would really benefit from having you two ladies with your beautiful minds and beauty as well in front of the cameras. Now, a couple of quick points. One is, what surprises me is there's so little criticism of the UN, the UNRWA, for example, and UNICEF. UNICEF has said they'd treat any babies anywhere, providing they're not Israeli. You never find this in the news. So we get all this. And also the other point about it is there was a banner on UNRWA building which said, "What Adolf started, we will finish." So none of this comes onto the papers at all. And what you've spoken about is truth, and we need that truth. Now, the question I'd like to ask is this: do you think, Dalia, that the trade between Israel and Egypt could help open some of the doors? In other words, as we know, we're sitting on a gold mine at the moment on the East Med gas and oil. And of course, Egypt are very involved in this, and so is Israel. Do you think that there will be a possibility here of bringing the oil and gas and using that to rebuild and resettle Gaza under a new regime?
Thank you so much, Simon, for your comment and for your great question, actually, because yes, I believe that there are many bruises that has happened to the relationship between Israel and Egypt in the past 2 or 3 months. But I believe that the fact that the two countries are very interdependent on each other in the context of the Eastern Mediterranean will somehow pave the way for them to return back to the right track of fruitful cooperation, economic cooperation in particular. Egypt is now suffering a lot by the fact that the gas supplies has stopped from Israel. It's affecting, actually in Egypt today, the electricity cuts every day for at least 2 hours on people, and this is like making people really angry and really uncomfortable. So this also shows you how serious it is that losing cooperation with Israel is very serious to Egypt, is a big issue for Egypt. So yes, in the context of the Eastern Mediterranean right now, with all this conflict going on, we had 3 key players that could have stabilized the Eastern Mediterranean. They are Israel, Egypt, and Turkey. Now we have seen like Turkey in the past few years reaching out to Egypt, reaching out to Israel, and fixing its relationship with them, and having like big ambitions about maybe making a triangle of gas exportation from Israel, Egypt, between Israel, Egypt, and Turkey. And they even proposed such projects, and they were very ambitious about it. But when the war started, we have seen like Turkey again showing its real face, which is very supportive of Hamas and the political Islamists, and so, which makes it more hard for Israel to trust now. I don't want to see, honestly, Egypt being falling in the same category for Israel, like being also seen as someone or some countries that Israel cannot trust anymore. So I think Egypt needs to immediately start working on fixing its relationship with Israel sooner than later, without waiting for this war to end, because eventually it's very important for us and very important for Israel too. So, but again, it all again depends on the domestic politics in Egypt, the domestic politics in Israel, and the war, and how the war will evolve.
No, do you have anything to add?
Perfect answer. She knows her stuff.
In which case, I'll move on to
Thank you
Flora
very-
Frank. Oh, Simon, sorry. Okay, Flora Frank.
Yes, thank you very much, Gary, as always. And thank you so much, Dalia and Fleur. It's been just unbelievable, an unbelievable session. Fantastic. And you are our heroine, Dalia. Really, you are. What people have called you, there are no words to praise you for what you've done, because there are not many people, what we call it Masirat Nefesh. You've given up your soul, so to speak. And we really thank you. We appreciate it very, very much. I speak as a very proud Sephardi Jew, and I must echo Fleur's comments when she said that she's very much, in favour of a museum, because I have to tell you, Fleur, that, and Gary might bear me out, that we had a wonderful gentleman on the Board of Deputies called Percy Gurji, who also came from Baghdad, from where my family come, and he tried very, very hard to bring the plight of our own refugees to the world. It's an underestimated, fact, and we also need compensation. They never really got it. It's important that, because you brought it up, and good on you, Kol hakavod, Fleur, and I think Sandra Dangor also said it, you really, really must go ahead with it, and if I can help in any little way, I think it's a must in Israel, a real must. And it really jarred on me that all the dignitaries go to Yad Vashem, which is extremely important. But what about the Sephardi Jewry, who plays a very great part in Israel? And I live in Israel part of the time. In fact, I'm in Israel at the moment. And what I wanted to say, Dalia, please forgive me, because maybe I misunderstood you. You very correctly said that the root of the evil of the rhetoric, of this terrible rhetoric coming out from the mosques, is really where we have to, start. But how, and in the education, I'm in adult education myself. I've been a high school teacher for many years, but I'm in adult. How are you going to get to those mosques? I'm being serious. You're very intelligent, you speak so beautifully, you put things over very well, you're very well informed, and you said something, and I really held on to it. You said, we have to get to the mosque. How are we going to get to those mosques? How are we going to get to the schools? I'm in education. My daughter was a head teacher for many years in Israel. Now she's also in others. You can't get to them. You go to the schools there. Israel's not even on the map. You go to the state-of-the-art schools. Even in Israel, we have some state-of-the-art schools, but not like my daughter was describing to me. And they were not allowed to say anything because it wasn't correct, politically correct. I said, Simon, why did you not say something? If I was there, I'm sorry, politically correct, I would say something. We're not allowed to say something. We took it up with our mefakeach, but we were told keep quiet. I mean,
Can we give Dalia a chance to answer? We're very short of time.
Thank you, Dalia.
Thank you, Flora. Dalia.
Thank you so much, Flora. Thank you so much. You're very kind. And yes, you made a very good point. Education in the schools is a very, very important point. But it still takes a lot of time to make a change in the schools compared to the influence that will happen if we make change in the mosques, where the root of the problem exists. Regarding schools, very quickly, actually, last year, Egypt made an initiative to change the text box to make it more friendly to the Jewish people, removing all the texts that spoke badly about Jewish hatred and so. This was last year and the year before only, and it happened in the primary school text box. So does it make an influence? Unfortunately, no, because the kids are not only depending on the schools now to get their education. They are using social media platforms like TikTok and others to also, which somehow also educates them. How can we get to the mosques? Is by giving training to the imams. In Egypt, there is a very good initiative led by Dar al-Ifta that has been going on for a while now, about 7 years or so, to educate imams to be more moderate and more open-minded. The imams in the mosques, I mean, I would say they are successful to a limited extent, only to a limited extent, because the number of mosques is huge and there is no control over what's being said there, as Fleur was saying, in happening in Dubai, for example. We don't have such control in Egypt. So I think also a little bit of control can make a difference.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Fleur, do you want to add anything?
No.
Right, our last question of the evening is Stephanie Cronson, and then if our Vice Chairman Keith Rowe, I believe, is proposing a vote of thanks, if Keith, you could be ready after that. Stephanie. You're on mute, Stephanie.
Sorry about that, and I'll try to be very quick because I know we're running out of time, and it's all been really, really interesting. I wanted to actually speak to something that Flo was saying about going back to the propaganda war and also Israel's PR platform, just to say that I think it was the late Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs who said that the hater cannot cure the hate. And I think that's very much in the case of Israel. I don't think anything that Israel would say would really matter, because I think facts don't matter. I mean, we know that up to 40,000 Iraqis died in the war on Mosul. It was fiercely defended by Amnesty International, who said that ISIS was ruthless in their use of human shields and the Iraqis were lucky to get away with their lives, but doesn't frame Hamas in quite the same way. But the one thing that I do think that we could do, and because you're in a person of influence, is the cyberspace, the internet is absolutely flooded with websites giving a particular narrative that really expunges the Jewish side of the story. There's one website, I think we have the Jewish Virtual Library, which isn't really going to attract any attention. It's sort of stuck in an echo chamber. And the one thing I would going to ask in terms of sort of any initiatives in Israel that are taking place to kind of address the deficit of information on the internet.
Well, I will say, Stephanie, that this war has made Israelis who don't normally either understand public diplomacy or get very involved in it, everybody's woken up. And all of a sudden, I'm in about 25 WhatsApp groups, and every WhatsApp group says this is the ultimate Asbara group. I'm involved with the Foreign Ministry. They've got a very strong digital team. And 3 weeks ago, I organized a hackathon, which is when,
Yes.
programmers do sort of try to take problems and find technological solutions. And I got the Foreign Ministry to formulate the 4 main challenges that Israel has in terms of its Asbara efforts. I was in another place with 28,200 graduates. This is the army, sort of highest technological force in the army intelligence force. And so what the difference is that for the first time since I moved here in 2001, I see Israelis waking up to the fact that there's no real government central command for Asbara. And that's a good thing, because finally I find that Israelis are getting, I keep saying this, especially with politicians, they get more provincial every year. And I think that this war's kind of made Israelis, the public, understand the importance of Asbara, because they're being attacked, because everybody's on Instagram and everybody's on TikTok, and all of a sudden they see the hatred. Remember, Israelis don't also understand anti-Semitism because they've always been a majority. Those of us who are immigrants understand anti-Semitism. Israelis don't. All of a sudden, they've woken up to anti-Semitism. And so there has been a shift in the sense that now the Israeli public, who was never really involved in this, everybody's gotten involved. And even though there's a little bit of chaos around it, I think ultimately it's a good thing that everybody's now aware that we're fighting a war on many fronts. And one of the fronts is the rhetorical front. And so I'm hoping that that will bring a new awakening of the importance of actually dealing with it as a national strategy, and not just a few people like me who can speak English and Spanish and do it because, we feel that we have to. And so, I'm hoping that's going to bring a new era of that.
Fantastic. And also just to mention AI.
Well,
Sorry.
exactly. Well, a couple of the things that I'm involved with now is, we said we're never going to outnumber the enemy on the diplomatic front and the public diplomacy front, but we are the startup nation. So just like we punch above our weight in so many other technological solutions that we found that we actually help the world with, we should be punching above our weight in technological solutions for Hasbara.
Fleur, do we have time for one more question?
Well, yeah, I mean, my night is gone now, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Fleur, Felix Mara, you'll be the last question. Felix.
Hello?
Hello, Felix.
Oh, hello. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dalia and Fleur. Dalia, you mentioned a prayer, which was either anti-Israel or anti-Jewish. Is that actually in a published prayer book, which would be possible to read in English, or did I perhaps misunderstand what you said?
Sorry, I don't understand. Like, do you
You
mean
mentioned
about
a prayer that is read out or recited in mosques, which is
the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish prayer?
No, actually, it's only 2 sentences. It's I'm sorry to repeat it, but it's like praying for cursing the Jewish people and who supports them and whoever supported them. So it's like I can like share the text with you, but it's in Arabic. It's like a stable prayer that, like,
I see. Does it come from the Quran, or
it comes from Hadith? Unfortunately, yeah.
I see.
Hadith is the teachings told by the Prophet.
I'm sorry. Yes, I know there are lots of discussions about how what's in the Quran is interpreted as in Tanakh, but
well, Felix, I will say that it's all about interpretation, because there's also some very interesting sentences in the Torah. We just don't use them.
Yeah, of course.
We have the commentaries that interpret them in different ways, and you will find peace-loving Muslim imams who will say, we got past this already.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Can I now hand over to Keith Rowe, our Vice Chairman, to propose a vote of thanks? Keith.
Good evening. Thank you, Gary. On behalf of the NGA, for taking the time to be with us this evening. Fleur, we are so privileged to have you as a friend of the NGA. Thank you for taking so much time out of your very busy schedule to ask questions this evening to discuss these topics. And I've got a special thanks to Dalia for opening up to the Egyptian side of current events. We hear so much about Gaza, Iran, Syria, etc., but really much about Egypt. I certainly was not aware at all of the dire economic situation in Egypt, and that really does have such a bearing on current. So thank you for opening our eyes to everything. You personally have made a huge personal sacrifice to tell the truth. Your insights have absolutely fascinating, and I do hope you will keep in touch with me and perhaps update us at some future. Hopefully things change for the better. Thank you for being with us. Thank you both for being with us this evening. Really appreciated.
Thank you both. Thank you, Fleur. Thank you, Dalia. I'll just say to everyone, we're going to have plenty more speaker meetings over the coming months. And we're also going to have an assembly meeting where we will be discussing a current topic, whether the British Jews have a future in this country long term. Anyway, thank you all very much. It just remains for me to wish everybody good night. Thank you for attending. And thanks again to Fleur and Dalia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.